The full moon illuminated the night as the cold wind blew through the trees of the forest. The nearby village was immersed in silence, its inhabitants seeking the comfort of sleep in the shadows of the old houses. However, beyond the mountains, upon the high cliff, stood a dark and imposing castle, its silhouette outlined against the starry sky. In this place, three vampires lived, bathing in the shadows of their ancient abode. Joel, a 35-year-old lumberjack with tousled hair and a carefree smile, was known for his good humor and strength in forest tasks. On this night, he ventured deeper into the forest than ever before, drawn by a mesmerizing song that seemed to echo among the trees. Unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows, Joel walked towards the sound, curious and fascinated. Eventually, the song led him to the black gates of the castle. The cold, heavy metal creaked as he pushed the door open, the sound reverberating through the empty, dark corridors. Despite his instinct urging him to flee, Joel felt irresistibly drawn to the castle, his mind shrouded in a fog of enchantment. Inside the castle, Joel was greeted by three women of supernatural beauty. Their long hair, eyes red as glowing rubies, and pale skin created a sinister contrast with the dark garments they wore. They moved with a lethal grace, approaching Joel with a smile that mixed charm and danger. "Welcome, man from the village," whispered one of the vampires, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You have been a gift to us tonight." Joel struggled against the enchantment, trying to keep his mind focused. "What do you want from me?" he asked, attempting to keep his voice steady, but feeling fear growing within him. The second vampire approached him, her cold breath touching his skin. "We want the same thing from you as we want from all men who enter here. Your life, your essence, your passion." The three vampires chuckled softly, the echoes of their laughter filling the hall. "But fear not," said the third vampire, touching Joel's face with a cold caress. "We shall give you something in return, an eternity of pleasures, a life beyond mortality."
Joel took a step back, his mind struggling against the enchantment and seeking an escape route. He knew that if he stayed any longer, his fate would be sealed. The lumberjack needed to find a way out of that dark and treacherous place, but the influence of the vampires made every thought a challenge. As Joel searched for an exit, the vampires smiled, their eyes gleaming with excitement. They were accustomed to dealing with their victims in a slow and manipulative manner, relishing the fear and confusion of the men who dared to enter their territory. However, Joel's fate was still to be decided. Would he confront the vampires and find a way to escape? Or would he be lost forever in the shadows of the castle? The outcome of the story was still open, awaiting the courage and cunning of the lumberjack to discover the right path to take. Joel took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart as the three vampires continued to watch him with hungry eyes. The room he was in was vast and decorated with ancient tapestries and imposing furniture. But despite all the sinister beauty, Joel knew he was in a dangerous situation. "Why do you hesitate?" one of the vampires asked, her eyes fixed on his. "Can't you see what we can offer?" Joel tried to keep his mind clear as he surveyed the environment around him. He noticed a door at the back of the hall, partially obscured by a heavy curtain. Perhaps that was his only chance of escape. "I am not interested in your offers," he said, trying to buy some time. "You are monsters, and I need to get out of here." The vampires smiled, as if Joel's words were a mere taunt. The third vampire, with a touch of impatience in her voice, replied, "You cannot escape, Joel. We called you here for a reason. Fate has sealed your arrival to us." Joel, however, was not willing to accept that fate without a fight. He decided to take a risk and try to reach the door at the back of the hall. Moving swiftly, he ran towards the heavy curtain. The vampires, surprised by his sudden action, began to laugh at his attempt. "It is foolish to try to escape from us, human," exclaimed the first vampire. But Joel was determined. He pulled the curtain aside and opened the door. A dark and narrow corridor stretched out before him, its stone walls illuminated by dim torches. The air was cold and damp, and he realized he was closer to an exit. The vampires, sensing his intention, moved quickly to block him, but Joel acted with agility. He grabbed a torch from the wall and brandished it towards them, creating a barrier of fire. The vampires recoiled in astonishment, their eyes narrowing with anger. "Do you think a torch can stop us?" said the second vampire, her tone dripping with contempt. Joel didn't reply, but kept the torch raised as he ran down the corridor, seeking a path to freedom. He needed to be fast, for he knew the vampires would not be easily deterred. The corridor led him to a spiral staircase which he descended hurriedly, torch still in hand. The echo of his footsteps mingled with the distant sound of the vampires who were pursuing him. Finally, Joel reached a large wooden gate, which seemed to be the castle's exit. He pushed the gate with all his might, but it was locked. Joel cursed his bad luck and began to search for some mechanism to open the gate. As he searched, he heard the vampires drawing closer and closer. Time was running out for Joel, and he needed to think of a way to escape quickly. Joel knew he needed to find a way to escape, but the vampires were closing in, and he didn't have enough time to figure out how to open the wooden gate. The vampires' laughter echoed through the corridors as he frantically searched for an exit. Before Joel could make any other attempt, the vampires surrounded him, their fangs bared, their eyes burning with deadly intent. Joel backed away, holding the torch tightly, but his hope was fading. "It's no use resisting, Joel," said the first vampire, approaching with chilling calm. "You are in our domain now, and you won't be leaving anytime soon." The other vampires laughed, their sharp voices reverberating off the stone walls. Joel knew his situation was desperate, but still, he needed to keep fighting. "Why do you do this? Why do you need me?" Joel asked, trying to understand the vampire's motivations as he continued to search for a way to open the gate. The second vampire stepped forward, her gaze cold and calculating. "We need your energy, your life," she said. "You humans are so ephemeral, and yet you possess something that gives us pleasure and strength." The third vampire, with an enigmatic smile, added, "But don't worry, Joel, we don't just want your death. We want to savor your pain, your despair. It's that emotion that truly feeds us." Joel shivered at the vampire's words. They weren't just interested in killing him quickly. They wanted to prolong his suffering for as long as possible. "You can't do this," Joel said, trying to maintain his composure. "I am a person, a human being. I am not a toy for you." The vampires laughed again, as if Joel's words were the most amusing thing they had heard in centuries. "Ah, dear lumberjack," said the first vampire, "you underestimate how much we long for your presence. A strong and determined human like you is a rare delight." Joel knew he needed to keep fighting, even if the odds seemed slim. He watched the vampires, searching for any weakness or distraction he could use to his advantage. As Joel tried to plan his next move, the vampires continued to close in on him, keeping him cornered against the large, locked door. Joel was about to face his greatest battle yet, a fight against immortal enemies who desired his destruction.
Joel was cornered, the torch trembling in his hands as the three vampires laughed with the cold sound of their laughter. He needed to find a way to escape, but the situation seemed increasingly bleak. The vampires were swift and cunning, and he knew he couldn't physically overpower them. "Why do you choose the men from the village?" Joel asked, trying to keep the vampires engaged in conversation as he searched for an escape route out of the corner of his eye. "There are so many people in the world. Why us?" The vampire with scarlet eyes, the first one he had encountered, approached him with a calculating look. "We desire what is rare, and the village near the castle has men with uncommon courage and strength. You are creatures of a vigorous essence, full of life." The second vampire agreed, her eyes watching Joel like a predator watches its prey. "Moreover, the men from the village do not speak of the castle or seek to hinder us. They are an easy choice, don't you think?" Joel remained vigilant, trying to process the information as he thought about his next move. "So why have you never revealed yourselves? Why do you remain hidden?" The third vampire stepped forward, her expression devoid of any emotion. "Humans fear what they do not understand, Joel. If we had shown ourselves before, we would have been hunted and destroyed. Besides, it's more fun to observe the village and choose our favorites in secret." The first vampire, realizing that Joel was trying to buy time with his questions, smiled sinisterly. "Enough talk," she said. "You are smarter than you seem, lumberjack. but we are tired of games. The vampires approached, and Joel knew he needed to act quickly. However, before he could make any decision, the vampires moved with surprising speed, restraining Joel with a force he could not resist. "You are ours now, Joel," said the first vampire, gripping his arm firmly. "You can try to escape, but we will always find you. It's better to accept your fate."
Joel struggled against the grip, his mind working frantically to find a solution. He needed to act before it was too late. The vampires held Joel firmly as he fought against the sense of despair threatening to consume him. His eyes met the sinister gazes of the vampires, searching for any sign of weakness or opportunity to escape. "You won't be able to escape, Joel," said the first vampire with a cold smile. "The castle is situated atop a cliff too high, and any attempt to escape would be fatal." Joel felt a chill run down his spine at the vampire's words. He knew they were telling the truth. The castle, built upon the impassable cliff, was a prison of stone and shadows. The second vampire added with a warning tone, "And even if you were to escape the castle walls, the fate that awaits you down there would be even more terrible. The fall would surely be your death." Joel felt a lump forming in his throat as he looked down, imagining the abyss stretching below the castle. He knew his chances of survival were slim, but still, a spark of hope flickered in his heart. As Joel processed this new information, the vampires continued to speak, revealing more about the castle and its inhabitants. "You must understand, Joel," began the third vampire with a soft voice, "that we are not alone in this castle. We have a master, a very powerful being, who will soon return." The vampire's words echoed in Joel's mind, increasing his sense of despair. He knew facing such a powerful being would be a nearly impossible task. "He will return in a few days," continued the first vampire, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "And when he returns, you will truly understand what it means to be under his dominion."
Joel felt the weight of the vampire's words upon him. He knew he didn't have much time before the castle's master returned, and he needed to find a way to escape before it was too late. As the vampires watched him with piercing gazes, Joel desperately tried to formulate a plan. He knew his only chance of survival was to find a chink in his captor's armor and find a route to escape before it was too late. The three vampires continued to hold Joel, their cold, firm claws gripping his arms. The first, a vampire with hair as blonde as shining gold, exhibited a confident and calculating smile. Her blue eyes shone with cunning and a dark wisdom as she watched every move Joel made with a haughty posture. The second vampire had dark hair, as black as the night. Her skin was pale, contrasting with her scarlet eyes, which gleamed like glowing embers. Her expression was calm, yet laden with malice and threat, as if she were assessing the best way to toy with Joel before deciding his fate. The third vampire, also with dark hair, had a more mysterious and ethereal appearance. Her eyes were deep and hypnotic, as if they could see through Joel's soul. She maintained an air of calculated coldness, speaking little but observing every reaction of the lumberjack with attention. "Come, lumberjack," said the blonde vampire, pulling Joel into the corridor. "You will spend the night in a room specially prepared for our guests." Joel felt his heart beating faster as the vampires led him out of the grand hall. They ascended a spiral staircase, the vampires' steps silent while Joel's echoed off the stone walls. The corridor they walked through was long and dark, illuminated only by torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. The walls were adorned with ancient tapestries and paintings of sinister figures, creating an even more eerie atmosphere. Finally, they reached a heavy wooden door carved with intricate details. The blonde vampire opened the door easily, revealing a room with antique and elegant furniture and a bed with red curtains.
Joel was pushed into the room, and the door was slammed shut behind him with a bang. He rushed to the window, hopeful to find an exit, but was met with the terrifying sight of the depths of the gorge below. The landscape was dark and daunting, with the abyss stretching as far as his eyes could see. The fall seemed endless, with sharp rocks and wild vegetation around. The view only confirmed the truth about escaping the castle being practically impossible. Joel stepped back from the window, overcome by a sense of claustrophobia. He was trapped, surrounded by sadistic vampires, and the threat of the return of a powerful master. The night would be long, and he needed to find a way to escape before it was too late. Options were dwindling, and Joel felt increasingly powerless against the darkness that surrounded him. Joel spent the night in his room, tormented by the events of the previous night and the uncertainty about what the vampires planned for him. The fear of attempting to escape the room kept him stuck, but the exhaustion from the confrontation and emotional tension eventually overcame him. He fell into a restless sleep filled with nightmares. When he woke up, it was already morning. The sunlight shone weakly through the window, bringing with it a sense of relief as it seemed that the danger had passed. He got up from the bed, feeling sore from the tension of the previous night. Joel noticed that the door to the room was slightly ajar, an unexpected change. Cautiously, he approached the door and opened it, seeing that the corridor was empty. Silence reigned, and the vampires were nowhere to be seen. Joel seized the opportunity to explore the castle, trying to discover more about the place or find a way out. He walked through the corridors, marveling at the ancient architecture of the castle, but also aware that he needed to remain vigilant for any sign of danger. Joel found no one, not even the vampires who had imprisoned him.
As he searched the castle, Joel found a large room with a large table in the center, covered with a variety of foods. There was fresh bread, fruits, cheeses, meats, and wine. The sight of the abundant breakfast surprised him, as he had expected to find a dark and gloomy castle, not a room prepared for a banquet. At first, Joel hesitated to touch the food, suspicious that it might be a trap set by the vampires. However, hunger gnawed at him, and he realized he needed energy to continue his search. Carefully, he approached the table and ate some bread and fruit, satisfying his hunger. As he ate, Joel continued to survey the room around him, searching for clues about what had happened to the vampires or if anyone else was present in the castle. He felt encouraged by the fact that he seemed to be alone for now, but he still needed to be cautious. After eating, Joel decided to continue exploring the castle, searching for an escape route or clues about the identity of the vampire's lord. He knew he couldn't waste time, as night would fall again, and he needed to take advantage of the daylight to find a way out. Joel roamed the corridors of the Grand Castle, exploring every corner in search of an exit. However, as he advanced, he found more and more closed doors and blocked passages. The castle seemed like a dark and impenetrable maze, its stone walls guarding obscure secrets. Time passed quickly, and the sun began to set on the horizon, casting a golden light over the castle's ancient walls. Joel's anxiety grew with each passing minute as night approached, knowing that the vampires would return soon, and he would once again be at their mercy. With a sigh of frustration, Joel decided to return to his room. He hoped that the next opportunity to escape the castle would present itself soon, but for now he had no choice but to face another night in that dark prison. The way back to the room was dark and silent, and Joel felt a shiver run down his spine as he passed through the empty corridors. The castle seemed more menacing as daylight faded, its shadows coming to life and dancing around him.
Finally, Joel reached his room and closed the door behind him, locking it carefully. He sat on the edge of the bed, feeling exhausted and disheartened. The night was coming, and he knew he would have to face once again the terror of the vampires. With a resigned sigh, Joel lay down on the bed and closed his eyes, trying to push away the dark thoughts that haunted him. He knew he needed to find a way to escape the castle before it was too late. But for now, all he could do was wait and pray that the light of the next day would bring a new opportunity for freedom. Joel tried to rest in his bed, but his sleep was interrupted by voices echoing through the corridor. He got up, cautious, and approached the door of his room, opening it slightly to listen better. The voices came from the large room that led to the castle's main door. Recognizing the voices, he realized they were the vampires. They talked and laughed, their sharp and eerie laughter reverberating through the corridors. Joel sneaked silently, getting as close as possible to the room where he could hear the vampires' conversation. "He's trying to escape from our castle," said the blonde vampire, her voice tinged with amusement. "He's persistent, that's for sure," replied the brunette vampire with scarlet eyes. "But he doesn't stand a chance. Our Lord will be here soon, and he will appreciate a new prisoner. Besides, we want to make the most of his stay," added the other brunette vampire with a sinister smile. "He's strong and vigorous. He's a rare delight." Joel shuddered at the vampire's words. They were talking about him, and clearly planning something sinister. He knew he needed to act quickly, but before he could think of anything, the vampires noticed his presence. "He's listening to us," whispered the vampire with scarlet eyes, noticing Joel sneaking around the door.
Joel quickly retreated, running back to his room. He locked the door behind him, trying to buy time to think of a way to defend himself. But the vampires were fast, and soon they were on his trail. The vampires' sinister laughter echoed through the corridors as they approached Joel's room. He heard their ominous voices in the sound of the doorknob being turned. The vampires burst open the door, finding Joel in his room. Their laughter reverberated through the room, creating an atmosphere of terror. "You thought you could deceive us, Joel?" asked the blonde vampire, her eyes shining with excitement. "You've been an intriguing guest," said the vampire with scarlet eyes, watching Joel intently. "But it's time we truly faced you." Before Joel could react, the other brunette vampire lunged at him with impressive speed. She overpowered him with force, her cold hands holding him with relentless strength. Joel tried to resist, but the vampire was stronger than him. The vampire's grip on his neck was the final blow. Joel tried to fight her, but his vision began to darken as the pressure increased. He heard the vampire's laughter around him before losing consciousness completely. The world darkened for Joel, leaving him at the mercy of the vampires, not knowing what would happen next. He only knew he was in deep danger, unable to escape the control of the vampires who had captured him. Joel woke up with a start, feeling the throbbing pain in his neck. As he touched the two tiny wounds, a wave of panic washed over him. The marks were a vivid reminder of the vampire's attack, a reminder of how close he had come to death. With a troubled mind, Joel knew he could no longer wait. He needed to escape from the castle as soon as possible, before the vampires or their lord returned to finish what they started.
Determined, Joel began a frantic search of the castle, exploring every nook and cranny in search of an escape route. However, despite his efforts, he continued to find only locked doors and blocked passages. The castle seemed to have been built to keep prisoners in, not to let them out. With a heavy heart, Joel returned to his room, feeling defeated. But as he reached the window, a new hope sparked in his chest. An open window on a distant wall of the castle, leading to another area. Joel realized that this could be his only chance of escape. However, he knew he couldn't just jump out the window and hope for the best. He needed something to help him safely descend to the other window. Thinking quickly, Joel began to search the room for something that could serve as an improvised rope. He rummaged through the furniture and searched every corner until he finally found an old, sturdy sheet. With renewed determination, Joel began tearing the sheet into wide, strong strips. He tied them together, forming an improvised rope. As he worked, he could feel time running out, knowing that, at any moment, the vampires could return. Finally, with the rope ready, Joel tied one end to an iron bar of the window and threw it down towards the open window on the other part of the castle. With one last look around the room, he prepared for the risky descent, hoping his courage and determination would be enough to lead him to freedom. Joel cautiously made his way through the dark corridors of the castle, each step echoing like a disturbing whisper in the empty halls. He was determined to find a way out of that dark prison, even if it meant facing the unknown. As he explored the corridors, Joel encountered several locked doors, each one representing an obstacle in his path to freedom. But he didn't give up, continuing his relentless search for an escape route. Finally, at the end of a dark corridor, Joel found a large staircase leading downwards, plunging into the depths of the castle. With his heart racing with excitement and apprehension, he descended the worn steps, his path illuminated only by the faint light of torches dotting the walls. As he advanced, Joel found himself in a large, dark room, its ancient stone walls echoing with the echo of his footsteps. He moved carefully, his mind sharpened with anticipation of what might come next. It was then that his eyes fixed on a massive wooden door in the corner of the room, standing out against the shadows around him. Curious, Joel approached the door, feeling a sense of unease growing in his chest. With trembling hands, Joel pushed the door, revealing what seemed to be an ancient crypt. The air was heavy with the smell of mold and decay, and Joel felt a shiver run down his spine as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. Inside the crypt, he saw 4 ancient coffins, a sense of terror enveloping him as he looked around, imagining what might have been hidden inside those coffins for so long. Despite the fear that gripped him, Joel knew he needed to keep exploring if he wanted to find a way to escape from that cursed place. With renewed courage, he ventured deeper into the dark crypt, his mind filled with determination as he faced the dangers that awaited him in the shadows. Joel felt a shiver run down his spine as he entered the dark crypt, where the 4 coffins were lined up in a macabre row. He hesitated for a moment, looking at the sleeping vampires inside the coffins, their eyes open as if they were watching him even as they slept. A feeling of helplessness washed over Joel as he contemplated his options. He knew he needed to act fast before night fell, and the vampires woke up to resume their hunt. The idea of destroying the vampires began to form in his mind, but he wondered how he could accomplish such a feat. He had no weapons or knowledge of how to face supernatural creatures like those.
As anxiety began to grow within him, Joel realized that time was running out. Night was approaching rapidly, and he needed to make a decision. Deciding it was best not to risk confronting the vampires directly, Joel turned and left the crypt, quietly closing the door behind him. He ran back to his room, his mind spinning with thoughts of how to escape the castle and the clutches of the vampires. Arriving in his room, Joel struggled to calm his racing breath. He looked around, making sure everything was as he had left it before heading to the crypt. Night was about to fall, and he knew he needed to be ready for anything that came his way. Feeling the tension in the air, Joel prepared to face another night of terror in the vampire's castle. He knew every moment was crucial, and his next decisions would determine his fate. With his heart pounding in his chest, he prepared for what was to come, praying to find a way to escape the darkness that surrounded him. Joel woke up in the middle of the night with a renewed sense of determination. He knew he could no longer wait for salvation from outside, so he decided to explore the castle once again in hopes of finding an escape route. Descending the castle walls, Joel explored rooms and corridors until he finally found a door leading to a large dark room. A sinister staircase led downward, and Joel felt a chill run down his spine as he descended the worn steps. What he found below was a terrifying sight. Large stakes were driven into the ground, each one holding the skeletons of impaled people, as if they were trophies of a dark and bloody past. The air was thick with the smell of death and decay, leaving Joel with an indescribable sense of horror. Even in the face of this macabre scene, Joel continued his search, finding a room next to it filled with chests. His eyes lit up at the treasure inside them, shiny jewels and gleaming coins. But what caught his attention the most was a box containing several ropes.
Joel knew those ropes would be his only chance of escaping the castle. In a hurry, he grabbed the ropes and began to tie them, forming a long extension that he could use to descend the cliff below. Without hesitation, Joel headed outside the castle, finding a secure position at the edge of the cliff. With his heart pounding in his chest, he began to descend slowly, each movement calculated to avoid imminent disaster. Finally, Joel reached the bottom of the cliff, falling into a tumultuous river. The cold water enveloped him, leaving him gasping and shivering with cold. But he was free, at least temporarily, from the castle's clutches and the vampires that haunted him. However, his joy was short-lived as he looked around in the darkness of the night and made a terrible discovery. Something was waiting for him in the shadows, something that left him paralyzed with fear and uncertainty. And so, even with his seemingly successful escape, Joel realized that his nightmare was far from over. Joel emerged from the frigid waters of the river, his body trembling with cold and exhaustion. However, his brief sense of relief was quickly replaced by paralyzing terror when he came face to face with the vampire. the Lord of the Vampires, waiting for him on the shore. The vampires stood beside him, their sinister laughter echoing in the air as Joel got up, his eyes filled with horror and despair. He knew he was cornered, that his escape attempt had failed, and that now he faced a dark fate at the hands of the vampire. "You couldn't escape, Joel," said the vampire with a cold and threatening voice. "No one can escape from our castle." Joel tried to retreat, but his movements were weak and clumsy after the ordeal he had just been through. He looked at the vampires, seeing the malicious pleasure in their eyes as they approached him. The feeling of helplessness overwhelmed him as the vampire made a gesture, and Joel fell to the ground, unable to resist the vampire's supernatural power. He felt a deep darkness enveloping him, his senses weakening as the vampire drew closer with a cruel smile on his lips. And so, as the vampire's laughter echoed around him, Joel realized that his struggle had come to an end. He was doomed to a fate of eternal darkness, forever trapped in the clutches of the vampires who had relentlessly hunted him.